Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Tribal Projects session this afternoon. Our first presenter up is Roger Kane with United Kituah Band. So Roger, with that, I will give the floor to you.
All right, thank you, Karen. My name is Roger Kane. I'm with the United Kituah Band. I'm an ethnobotanist with them, and I'm here talking to you about our citizen science project grant we had going last 2 years. I'm being interrupted by the COVID, of course. But we've been building Southeast River Cane Monitoring Initiative for Cultural and Ecosystem Services. There's a grant to map river cane here in Northeast Oklahoma, across the state of Oklahoma and Arkansas, parts of the Southeast United States, but we focus here in the UKB land area. And when we approached it was through a youth, teaching our youth. I'm trying to go to the next one. Ooh. Approaching through the youth, teaching them just about river cane itself, not just, a lot of times when people teach about plants or culture or art, they don't teach about the plant. So we were wanting to teach them about river cane systems themselves so they'd become citizen scientists. And that's what the grant was about. So we were wanting them to map river cane. About river cane with them, about teaching them how cane breaks are maybe 2 or 3 plants, and here we are playing with river cane, little baby cane breaks down at the bottom, and breaking them up and giving them out to the public. And they were learning about the parts of river cane, the comb, the rhizomes, and stuff like that, and learning how long it takes for them to grow and stuff like that. So we're approaching the youth into the origins of the plant themselves, how the plant grows, and then we're also teaching the culture, because a lot of people misunderstand river cane is just for baskets. River cane was more than that for the all Southeastern Indians, and we were approaching it as a teaching tool. About the technology of river cane, how to process it, how to clean it, and to really appreciate it, how it goes into a part of our culture. The plant itself is part of our culture as well as the product from the plant. We also gave away seeds, river cane seeds. They're really hard to find.
Roger, we're having a hard time hearing you. Maybe your microphone may be having some issues.
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yes, that's better.
Okay, so we gave away river cane seeds last year, but this year we weren't able to because of the extreme cold this year, and it knocked the river cane out. All the leaves died off, and so it didn't come to seed as usual, usually in April through May, and so we weren't able to give away seeds this year, but we hopefully will this next year. Another cool idea about mapping this river cane we came across in Arkansas. The homelands of the UKB is in Arkansas with the old settlers. And whenever Arkansas became a state, they mapped a couple of cane breaks there in central Arkansas, and we're trying to find them and see if they're still alive. So those cane breaks are 200 years old. And what we're finding from just mapping the cane breaks here in Northeast Oklahoma, these cane breaks have been in these same spots for 150 years. And what's cool is we're correlating it. And river cane ecosystems are really older than people know. We don't know how to age river cane breaks. We don't know how to do it, and we're trying to learn that. That's what's cool about the citizen science grant that we're doing. Get to explore with different people, talking about different ways to study science and different kinds of way river cane grows. Another cool project we did was with the University of Tennessee, a graduate student, and she was into lithics, and there was and they was wanting to study if a river cane scarred the flint tools, and so she had a hard time finding people that could split and peel river cane with flint, and so she called and we said, "Sure, we can do that," and we did it, and sure enough, river cane scars the flint whenever it's been worked. So whenever they can pull it out of the ground, they can tell whether it's been worked on river cane or not, which is really neat because river cane is the most abundant found plant in any of the archaeological records. So, and different things from coming out of this grant is that we've been working with different federal agencies, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, U.S. Forest Service, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And really neat how it's been added in there. These federal agencies didn't realize that river cane is an indigenous bamboo to North America. There are 3 species here in North America that are bamboo, and more people know about it, the more we can appreciate our indigenous plants, our indigenous bamboos. And so from this, the Army Corps of Engineers has decided that river cane is a cultural keystone species. And that's really important. And that's putting it up there, river cane up there with the mosquito of the American Southwest, the prickly pear cactus in Madagascar, and different other plant species. Like you think of wild rice, you think of it as the tribes growing wild rice. But river cane is what made the southeastern woodland people here in the United States. And it's very important. So it's really neat how, and also U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has added river cane into their riparian areas for repair added the plant to the riparian areas. So that's really important there. It's been added before they ignored the fact that river cane is indigenous and does some really great bank work. Another one is the river cane gathering, been working with the U.S. Forest Service, and they're working with the different tribes. Different tribes are doing different kinds of river cane conservation projects. I see Choctaw Nations here doing a presentation in this group. I think you are doing some cool stuff. Southeastern tribes doing river cane work, conservation. But an upcoming event for this fall is with the Army Corps of Engineers. It's the Indigenous Approaches to River Cane Restoration, so they call it the River Cane Alliance. And there's a bunch of different tribes coming together to help the federal agencies to see how to improve river cane ecosystems and to improve it to the landscape and just it's just a neat plant that another one coming up in the spring is with the Forest Service, and they'll be here in Tahlequah. And it just depends on this COVID stuff. Both of them depends on whether it's going to be in person, stuff like that. But I think the Army Corps of Engineers one's going to be open to something like we're doing today. And thank you all for listening to this. It's a nice little science project we have going with EKB, and we have some more going. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger. Roger, if you stop sharing your screen, you should be able to see your chat box to check to see if we have any questions. I don't see any just yet in my chat box. And also, if you're calling in, you can email me the questions for any of the presenters and I will forward it on. I don't see any in my chat box. Do you see any in yours, Roger?
Okay. Sure don't.
Well, we'll move on, and if we have any questions, we'll go back to it a little later.
Okay,
thank you, Roger.
All right, thank you.
Okay, our next presenter up is Regina Sapp. Regina is with the Peoria tribe, and I am giving you presenter privileges right now, Regina, and that way if you click on the share button at the bottom, you'll be able to share your screen, and it's best if you have your PowerPoint already open and then hit the button at the bottom of the screen, and then you can click on your PowerPoint to share it. We can see your PowerPoint, Regina. We're not able to hear you, Regina, and you are unmuted. Regina, are you using a microphone on a laptop or are you using a desktop? If you're using a desktop, you may have to go up to the audio and video settings and let WebEx know which option you're using. You'll have to go to the speaker and microphone settings under audio and video, and then choose which option you want to use under that setting.
Regina, if you would like us to move on to Ron, we can. And then we can come back to you. Just let Karen know in the chat box if you would prefer to do that. All right. Ron, are you okay with us going with you?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Karen's going to go ahead and give you presenter privileges then, and we will try to work out Regina's audio stuff while you're presenting. So with that, our next presenter is going to be Ron Workman with the Choctaw Nation. Ron, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Let me get my PowerPoint going. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ron Workman with the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma. I'm an environmental specialist. I've been here for about a year and a half, and my specific responsibilities are the implementation of a facility review program. It's similar to an audit program. We've been at it about a year and a half now. So this presentation just kind of goes over how we do things here. Kind of want to get in the weeds a little bit on the things we do. So, like I said, I've been here for about a year and a half. So back in 2018, our department kind of formed a environmental compliance group out of our environmental protection services division, and we realized that we had some problems across our nation, some non-compliances. So back in 2018 and 2019, we hired a third-party company to come in and do some environmental audits on all of our different facilities across the nation. And out of that, they found 152 potential non-compliance issues. So because of that, we kind of recognized that we needed our own program and a continual program that we follow up on things every year. So in January of 2020, that we kicked off our program, and we started. We looked at some of the things from the third party company did for us and the issues they had, and we kind of formed our questionnaire, which has kind of changed and grown over the course of the last year or so. In March of 2020, we started our pilot program. So we wanted to kind of start it small and see how things look. So we picked 10 different facilities across our nation that were operated by us, and we did reviews on them. It seemed to work well, and we took all of our existing facilities and prioritized them based on what kind of risks they had and how much traffic came through there, and just a few different factors on how and whether we needed to go see them every quarter or every month or once a year or biannually. So we worked and developed a set of questions. We tested a few different types of softwares, and we created a database for our program, and I'll discuss those in more detail in the next few slides. As of a year later, in January 2021, we had completed at least one review of all of our known Choctaw Nation facilities. I say known because our program continues to expand. We are inspecting sites that we weren't when we started, so we see a need for different type of inspections and surveys. So our contact list, it grows, almost on a monthly basis. We find new things we need to go look at. So in the course of that year, we found 171 non-compliances. And in that year's time, we were able to resolve 141 of those non-compliance issues. I've got some pictures in here of some of our facilities and some of the things we inspect, because I know that this might kind of be similar to some of the things that you all might see. This is a picture of one of our big generators. A couple of our guys are doing an inspection on. So currently, we inspect all of our different types of facilities. We look at casinos, travel plazas, which are like gas stations. We look at our country markets, our community centers, medical centers, manufacturing, wellness centers, and ranches. We've recently expanded these to go look at our housing sites. We look at our production leases. So some of our big ranches and stuff may have as many as 20 different oil or gas wells on them. And we go look at those and make sure that there's not any issues. We do above ground storage tank inspections, underground storage tank inspections. We have a few facilities that are SPCC facilities. We have specific questionnaires. We go in and look at those. And then we have recently added drone reviews to our program. So some of our big ranches are several thousand acres, so it's hard for us to cover them. But we can fly a drone up and do some aerial pictures and do some aerial surveys and see if there are areas of concern for us to go look at. Some things we want to add in the future. We want to add a management review program, and I'll talk about these in a little more detail later on. But basically, this is where we go back up to the, kind of the higher up management level of the different types of facilities we do, and we talk about issues they have and things that we need to do. We want to do a deep dive on records, documentation. So we want to look at manifests. We want to look at, test records for NPDES permits, things like that. Are trying in the process of getting federal credentialing for our underground storage tank inspections, our FIFRA inspections, and our stormwater inspections. So here's some pictures of our auditors or reviewers out in the field looking at things. So here's an example of one of our stormwater inspectors out doing an inspection. These guys are doing an AST inspection. So they're looking at the contents, making sure the spill kit's there. And then to the right's an example of somebody checking an emergency vent on a above ground storage tank under a generator. So the first thing we talked about when we started our program was we want to call it a review instead of an audit. I know sometimes in this presentation I may say audit, but what I mean to say is review. We kind of wanted to take a partnership or an assistance approach to our inspection process instead of a regulatory or an authoritative approach. So we want to help our folks be in compliance and assist and not, we try to have a partnership and that's worked really well for us. We've had a few instances of people actually asking us to come do a review on their facility because they need help getting some funding. They want to have a report that points out their shortcomings. So we found that this partnership assistance approach has been really well received and works really, really good, and it was the right approach. So as I said earlier, we've we've kind of assigned a frequency to our reviews based on how much risk is there. So, we have different types of facilities. We have casinos, we have some manufacturing facilities that have chemicals, we have, some daycares, and we have community centers. So something like, a daycare or community center, there's not a whole lot of risk there. They don't have a lot of stuff that's environmentally interesting. So we may only go see them once per year. But somewhere that's like a travel plaza or a gas station or a casino that has, flammable chemicals or just a lot of traffic or any number of issues, we prioritize those and go visit them once per quarter. Our schedule is housed in our environmental compliance review SharePoint site, and I'll kind of go into that in detail over the next few slides. Right now, we review 219 facilities per year. And based on the frequency of those facilities, we do about 430 reviews per year. And we manage that with a 3-member team. So we have three different reviewers that go out in the field during the week, and we can manage these 400 reviews per year. So our review survey, so we have a few different types of review surveys, but the one I'm discussing here is what we call our ECR. So it's Environmental Compliance Review Survey. So it's not a deep diving, specific in the weeds questionnaire. It's kind of a comprehensive and broad questionnaire. So the way we use this is we go out and do an ECR survey that's comprehensive. It covers, air, water, chemical storage, waste disposal, things like that. And then if we see a need, we can send our more detailed questionnaires that deep dive into those subjects. So this one's kind of an all-encompassing, broad range survey. There's a lot of different softwares out there to do these kind of things. We chose iScout because it fits our needs really well. We created a scoring system that it's just a relative scoring system. So outside of us, it really doesn't mean a whole lot, but we're able to use it to have a relative comparison between the different types of facilities that we deal with. Our survey, when we finish it, it generates a PDF report, so with pictures and things like that at the end of the survey. So on this slide, I'm going to talk about SharePoint. SharePoint we use it for almost everything on our program. It's a centralized internet site. And we have a master facility contact list, which I'll show you some screenshots of here in a little bit. It's basically got all the contact information for each facility. We also use this to assign, so we split our 430 some odd reviews up into the different quarters. And I'll show you how we do that. We assign them to the different quarters so our reviewers are able to go in and decide what quarter that we're currently in. They can look at what needs to be reviewed and what's been completed. And we'll look at some screenshots of that in here in just a little bit. We store all of our ECR reports there. So, we add attributes across the top, it's much like an Excel spreadsheet. So you can sort by, county, city, district, what type of facility is, and I'll display that. It's got live metrics. So we have a few different key graphs we look at that update about once per day. We can go in and look at any time. It's got automatic workflows. So once we upload a report, we can add a contact name that we want the report to go to, and it'll automatically send it out. We also have a corrective action register in SharePoint. So when we go out and do a facility review, if we find a non-compliance issue, we don't want to just find it, we want to fix it. So we take a non-compliance item and we basically convert it to a corrective action. So what needs to happen to fix it? So we create corrective actions for non-compliance issues, and we assign a responsible party. We assign a due date and then a follow-up date, and we can mark it resolved or unresolved, and we can track how many days late it is. And we can, anytime we want, we can pull metrics on, type, city, district number, what types of corrective actions do they have, what categories do they fit under, just anything you can imagine we can pull metrics on, as long as we have it enter that information in when we enter the corrective action. This is just kind of an overview of what our SharePoint site looks like. So these different icons here are the to different dashboards. So if you can click on any one of these and go in and look at those, like those 4 key graphs, which I'll show on a later slide. So those are living graphs. I think they update once per day. And it's all pulls all of its information from the different sites within SharePoint. Over here to our left is kind of our navigation bar. So specifically today, we're talking about ECRs. So you can see we've got our ECR calendar, we've got our ECR corrective actions, we've got our ECR reports. We've got other programs that we work on. We've got an open dump site program you can see over here that we can track information on those. We track information on all of our generators, ASTs, USTs, all of our permits, licensing, and reporting we track. Just everything that we deal with on a day-to-day basis that we think we might ever want to pull metrics on or that needs to be, checked on or tracked, we use SharePoint for. I've got some pictures in here of just random stuff that we found in our reports. I put it in here because I thought maybe some of you folks might have seen stuff like this similar. So this is just an unknown aerosol that was being stored outside in the elements at one of our facilities. This is a grease bin. So one of our facilities that cooks had, they had kind of mismanaged when they're filling this up, this receptacle with grease, they kind of spilled it on the ground, and storm water can run across it and put it into the sanitary sewer. This is an abandoned underground storage tank we found that wasn't registered on one of our properties. All of these have been fixed since we found them, but these are just examples. So our master facility contact list, I talked about this a little bit earlier. So this is, we started this and we didn't have a good list of, what facilities we have first off and where we need to go and who we needed to contact. So we built that in SharePoint. It's got, facility name, facility type. So at the Choctaw Nation, we have 5 different divisions. And we list those because later on we might want to pull out, average score by division or average number of corrective actions by division or anything like that. Anything we think upper management might want to see. And then of course we've got physical information like city, county, tribal district, the basic contact information. Something we added that's really been helpful was a notable processes column. And this is, when our reviewers are going out and looking at a facility, they can look in SharePoint and they can see, okay, do they have an SPCC plan? Do they have tier 2 reporting? Do they have hazardous chemicals? They can filter by these. So this kind of just it's a summarized view that our reviewers can look at and be prepared before they go out and review a facility. And on the same site, they can say, okay, this facility requires an SPCC plan. Then they can go click on that in that same SharePoint site, and there's an actual copy of the facility's SPCC plan. So they can look at it in about 10 seconds and see if it's, is the SPCC plan up to date, all that stuff. As I said earlier, we've got a self-service review schedule. So our facilities are split up into quarters. And I've got some screenshots of that we'll look at here in just a few minutes. So, okay, so this is a screenshot of our master facility contact list. As you can see, these are the facilities over here to the left. We've got facility type. This is those 5 divisions I was talking about earlier. So this is just like an Excel spreadsheet. So you can click on any one of these columns and you can filter by. So if you were looking at this and you said, okay, I want to see only facilities that were within commerce, you could click on this and click commerce and it would just show facilities that were in the commerce thing. This is the notable process column I was talking about. So, I can look at this and I know that, I can look at, say, our headquarters building. I know that it's got a generator, it's got an SPCC plan, it's got an NSR air permit. We do tier 2 reporting, and it has some hazardous chemicals on site. So this tells me right before I go out to audit or do a review, some interesting things that I need to be looking for. Land status, is it trust land? Is it fee land? And then the physical stuff. Okay, so this is a screenshot. This is an example. What I'm getting to is an example of the filtered view. So this is just the review schedule. So if I'm a reviewer and I'm in quarter 3 right now, I want to build my schedule out. When I go to this list, it shows the stuff that's required in quarter 3, quarter 2, quarter 1. So, but all I care about right now is really quarter 3 because that's where I'm at. So if I want to build my list, I simply click on quarter required, and then I would click quarter 3, and that's what's displayed here. So now I'm looking at only facilities that are required to be reviewed in quarter 3. I know some of these say 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's because these are higher risk facilities. So we look at those every quarter, but this shows everything that's needs to be looked at in quarter 3. So the next thing I look at is, has it been done? So we've got 3 different reviewers working out of this site. So if we didn't mark complete or incomplete, we'd be doing the same thing twice, or maybe stuff would get skipped. So in the next one, I would apply another filter. So now I've got stuff that's required in quarter 3, and then I've got status over here. So I want to set this filter to incomplete. So now I can look at facilities that are required in quarter 3 that are incomplete. And then I can do things over here like say, I want to do all of the facilities in Clayton. I don't have a filter applied here, but I could filter for Clayton, and it would show me only facilities that are required in quarter 3 that are incomplete in the city of Clayton. And I could build my daily schedule off that. So that's kind of how the filters work in SharePoint. Like I said, we use iScout for our questionnaire, our survey. It's comprehensive. We cover the areas I talked about earlier: chemical management, waste management, permitting, and water and sewer. It's customizable. So if we want to change questions or add questions or change the wording of a question, we can do it all in-house. We don't have to have any technicians or specialists to be able to do that. It can be used on a tablet or a phone. It can be used online or offline. Like I said earlier, it generates a PDF report with pictures. So one really nice feature is it has logic in it that eliminates unnecessary questions. So as I said earlier, we're doing anything from a child care center to a manufacturing facility. So I don't have to ask the same questions at a daycare that I have to ask at a manufacturing facility that has 20 different types of hazardous chemicals. And the way this works is we have one survey, but it works for everything because of the logic, and I'll display that in the next few slides. Like I said earlier, we've got a relative scoring system, so we can just compare the different facilities, divisions, and districts, or whatever we want to see. The way ours works is we ask informational questions first. So not every question is scoreable. Some stuff is just informational. And then depending on how you answer that informational question, it leads to a scoreable question. So I'll kind of display that. In the way we went back and forth on our scoring system and what's a major issue and what's a minor issue. And what we basically settled on was, 2 things we're really concerned about in our environmental department is, first is the issue immediately dangerous to the environment or human health? That's a big one. So what we do is we ask informational questions, and then we ask scoreable questions. And for every scoreable question, we ask these 2 questions that I'm talking about. And if you answer yes to any one of those 2 questions, then the issue goes from a minor issue to a major issue. And those 2 questions are, is it immediately dangerous to the environment or human health? And is the issue detrimental to the Choctaw Nation's reputation or sovereignty? So the next few slides is going to be an example of how that logic I was talking about works for iScout. And for this example, we're going to be focusing on this 3rd question, this SPCC question. So you're going down through here and say we're doing a daycare or a Head Start. So are they required to have an air permit? We say no. Are they required to have a NPDES permit? We say no. Okay, so are they required to have an SPCC plan? This is daycare. They don't have any tanks over 1,320 gallons. They don't have any kind of big storage tank. So no, they're not required to have an SPCC plan. So that's great. So we don't want to have to answer all the questions that apply to SPCC if they don't even have an SPCC plan. So since we answered no to it, we just skip right to the next question about Tier 2 reports. So in the next slide, we're going to look at a bigger facility that has some operations that maybe they do have an SPCC plan. So this is like, say, one of our ranches that have 1,500 gallons of, say, gasoline storage or diesel storage. So is the facility required to have an SPCC plan? Yes. So since we answered yes to this question, it populates some specific questions that have to deal with SPCCs. So should they have an SPCC plan? This is just an informational question. There's no score associated with it. Okay, but since they said yes, now they have to answer a scoreable question. Does the facility have an SPCC plan? And this particular facility does have an SPCC plan. So that's great. So that's the way we want them to answer. So this is a scoreable question. They don't get any points counted off. So another question that pops up because they have an SPCC plan, are their training logs up to date? Well, yes, they are. So no points counted off. Is the site contact information up to date? Yes, that's great. So this facility did great. There's no issues here. So the next slide is an example of, if they answer some stuff in the wrong way. So are they required to have an SPCC plan? Yes. Do they have an SPCC plan? No. Okay, so that's a problem. So that's going to count some points off. And now, since we answered incorrectly, we're going to ask those two core questions. Is this condition detrimental to CNO reputation and sovereignty? Yes. So that now this issue goes from a minor issue to a major issue. And we marked yes on here too, just for an example. And then is the site contact information up to date? So this came up because they answered yes to this initial question. We said no, and this is just an example to show you how this works. So in this slide is an example of what our PDF report looks like. So we color coded questions that were scoreable and questions that were just informational or not color coded. If they answer in a wrong way or in a negative way, the question shows up as red. If they answer correctly, it shows up as green. So this is just an example. I just created this for this presentation. Here's some more pictures of some stuff we found in our ECR view. So this is some open dumping. This is universal waste. Didn't have an initial collection date on it. Here's another example of some open dumping. Our ECR report database. So we generate all these reports, and then what do we do with them? We don't want to just leave them in iScout. We want them where we can pull metrics off of them. We can organize them if somebody wants to see them and they're readily available. So we store them in SharePoint, and then we have backup storage in iScout. Again, there's automatic workflows in SharePoint. So once we upload these reports and put a contact name in there, it automatically emails them out to who it needs to go to. Those attributes that go across the top, I mean, you could put anything you want to. You might want to filter by later and pull metrics on. So that's some of the things we do. Reports. So this is permission based. So not just anybody can go in and look at another facility's report. Everything is permission controlled. This is our ECR report database. It looks similar to the other one. So this is, we have a naming nomenclature for our reports that keeps everything in order. We enter these attributes. So, this is the division that they're under. This is the score that they had. This is the audit date, the county, district, facility type. These are those workflows I was talking about. So whoever's in this email list is going to get a automated email with a copy of this report. We've got auditor, we've got findings. So at the end of the year or at the end of the quarter, when I'm having my team meetings with my reviewers, I can pull up and I can say, hey, you've got, why do you have so many more findings than another auditor? We can look at all kinds of different things like that. This is just an example of our ECR database with a filter applied. So these are all the reports, and we've got commerce, and that's one of our 5 divisions. So we're looking at just reports that have been done on commerce facilities. So you can, if you're looking for a certain report, you can find it here pretty easy. So as I talked about earlier, when we go out and we find problems, we have corrective actions. And we find problems, we generate a corrective action, and we want to track those corrective actions. So we don't want to just tell people to fix stuff and then forget about it. We want to follow through, make sure that issues are getting fixed. And so we created a corrective action register in our SharePoint site too. So like I talked about earlier, we split everything into 5 major divisions that the Choctaw Nation operates under, and then we split those another degree just because there's different types of facilities within the 5 major divisions. We have physical information, so we can filter by any of this stuff. Our categories go into 4 major categories: chemical management, waste management, permit, licensing, and reporting, and other. And then we go one step further, and we go a step further so that at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, we can say, okay, where do we need to? We also, in our department, we have a training division. So we generate custom training. And what we can do is pull metrics at the end of the year or the end of the quarter, and we can say, okay, 65% of our corrective actions have to do with chemical management. And 75% within chemical management have to do with storage condition, and we can really dial in or drill down and find out where we need to direct training and work on training folks. We again, depending on how we answered those 2 core questions during the review or the survey, we classify them as major or minor. Responsible party, we assign a due date. This, just like the report, has an automatic workflow. So when we create a corrective action, it sends out an automatic email to the responsible person. We can put reminder dates. We can track how many days late they are beyond the resolution date, whether they're resolved or unresolved. So we can turn this date tracker off once they're resolved, but simply by marking them resolved. So this is a look at our corrective action register. So again, we've got what facility it was, the facility type, the specific corrective action, and then this is the broad category. So these were those, I think there were 5 that I talked about, and then this is where we break it down another degree to be able to point training towards. Is it a major, minor? Has it been resolved or unresolved? And then this is just kind of a description. So this is an example of what we would do if we were like, it's one of our, we have meetings every couple of weeks with our audit team to look at issues that need to be resolved or unresolved. So here's a good example of how to prioritize unresolved issues. So we're going to look at corrective actions, and what we're interested in is stuff that's not fixed yet. So we're going to filter by unresolved. So this is showing me only stuff that has not been fixed. And then we want to look at the oldest stuff. So we're going to filter by days late. So this tracks days late beyond the assigned resolution date, and we want to look at oldest first. So now I've got unresolved action items, and I've got the oldest listed first. So we're going to be picking up the phone or getting in a vehicle and going out in there and visiting with those folks and finding out why they don't have this issue resolved, or seeing if we need to help. But this is just a good example of how we can use filters to prioritize things in SharePoint. This is a look at our live metrics that are housed in SharePoint. So these are those divisions we talked about, and these are split out by year and then by quarter within the year, and it's just kind of a showing the average score. These are the number of reviews that we've conducted through the different years, or since 2020, in the different months and the different quarters. So this is kind of our pilot program, this 10 reviews here. And then we kind of had, we went on quarantine for Corona, and then we got released from quarantine. We had a whole bunch of reviews, and now we've kind of we know what we need to do every quarter, so it's kind of leveled out. So we're well on pace to hit our numbers this year. This is just another example of metrics. These are number of findings. So these are issues that we found, and this kind of shows us that our program's working, because as we go along, we're finding things are leveling out. We're not finding as many issues. These are the different categories. So this is an example of, if we see one really big category up here constantly, then we probably need to direct some training that way or something. So about 6 to 8 months into our review program, we wanted to look and see, what people thought of it and how our reviewers were working and how the impact we were having. So we created a quality assurance survey. So now every time we send a report out, that automated workflow sends a link to this survey, and we incentivize it with a drawing. So if you fill out this report and send it back to us, then then you are entered to get a ball cap or something like that. So we use Microsoft Forms for our particular survey. It goes out with every ECR report. It's about 10 questions. It takes less than 5. It usually takes about 1 or 2 minutes to complete. We wanted to keep it short. We can pull metrics. All of our stuff is, it works with Microsoft. So we can pull metrics easily, and we can show those on quarterly reports or annual reports, or just look at them for ourselves. Future stuff we want to look at, management review. So at the end of the year, we want to go back to the upper management of these different types of facilities, and we want to talk about, reoccurring issues that they're having and what kind of training issues they might need or stuff we can help with. We try to do it right before budget season so that if there's budgetary needs that they need to take care of, they can do it at the right time. We want to get into specific records and documentation reviews. So right now our facilities are pretty comprehensive. But we want to create a documentation specific review where we go in and spend a day or two with these folks and looking at their manifests and their test records and things like that, and maybe their restricted use pesticide licenses and their NPDES permits. We're pursuing some federal credentialing. We want to branch out. We want to do as much as we can on our own. So we're pursuing federal credentialing for USTs, FIFRA, for SWIPs. We're adding, I hope by the end of this month, our own GIS layer. So we've got a group in the Choctaw Nation that's dedicated to GIS, mapping all of our properties. So we want to have our own GIS layer so that you can pull up a map and you can click on a facility and it'll show you exactly where USTs are, ASTs, any water bodies, any applicable licenses that facility has, any applicable permits, what kind of hazardous chemicals they may have on site. We want to be able to, look at a map that's maybe like Google Maps or something and click on a building and it pull up all this stuff up, like the past year's worth of ECR reports and past corrective actions associated with that facility. So that's all I've got. My contact information is on the slide. If anybody has any questions, I guess we can do that now. Or
Thanks, Ron. You might want to check your chat box to make sure that you didn't receive any questions. I haven't seen any in our chat box just yet.
okay. I'm trying to get to my chat box. Okay, here it is. Okay, yeah, I don't see any questions.
Okay, thank you. We can always come back if we get any questions a little later. So with
Okay.
that, we'll move on to our third presenter, which is Regina Sapp with the Peoria Tribe. Regina, I passed the presenter privileges to you, and you should be able to share your screen.
I'm excited to try this again. Can you guys hear me this time?
We can just barely hear you, Regina. Can you turn your volume up a little bit?
Let me take you off my, I've got you guys. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Let me get this started. Now I'm really excited. I'm having
And we can see your presentation.
Wait. Yes,
Perfect.
awesome. Okay. So I'm just going to talk to you guys a little bit about our muscle program and what we do. I'll try to be fast going through the slides. I have quite a few because I can't control myself. So I want to do a little bit of a background about freshwater mussels because not a lot of people know a lot about them. So freshwater mussels, they exist in lakes, streams, ponds at the bottom, and they look like rocks, some more so than others. On my presentation, I've got 3 examples of the endangered species our tribe works with. This is rabbit's foot at the top. At the middle is winged maple leaf, and then at the bottom is Neosho mucket. And we work with all 3 of these species kind of at any given time, but our priority has been on Neosho mucket recently. So freshwater mussels are filter feeders, so they're eating algae, decaying material, bacteria, that type of thing. And they also, although they don't eat soil, they will basically consume the soil and spit it back out at the bottom. So it'll make your ponds, rivers, streams very pristine. The more mussels you have, the clearer your water becomes. So there's actually a lot of good use for it as far as like agricultural ponds or recreation goes, because it can give those water bodies an aesthetic look. 71.7% of all mussel species in the U.S. and Canada are either endangered, threatened, or of special concern. I'm going to talk about why in a minute, but the life cycle is kind of associated with it, so I'm going to discuss that first. So a mussel life cycle is really strange. I like to think of them as evil caterpillars. They have a larval stage, much like the caterpillar does with caterpillar to butterfly. But their larval stage is something called a glochidium. And a glochidium is basically, it has no function except a single muscle that can attach to a fish gill or fin. So what happens is these mussels, the pregnant female mussels, will brood their larvae in their gills. At certain times of the year, the larvae will be basically developed enough to attach to fish. The pregnant female will throw out a lure, which I have right here and right here. The fish will bite the lure, and it'll end up ingesting all of these glochidium when they think it's ingesting a smaller fish. And these lures can get very advanced. So this one is pretty basic, but then this one you can see the eye slits on it. On the, when I say this one, I mean the bottom right. You can see eye slits on the glochidium. So what this is it's a sac, and every single line is basically filled with these larvae. And so when the fish bite that, it basically explodes in the fish's mouth. The larvae develop on the fish for about 2 weeks. Sometimes it can be months, but usually it's about 2 weeks. Species varies. Then they drop off as very, very tiny mussels the size of a grain of sand. And over the course of, generally speaking, about 3 years, they become mature adults themselves. So mussels are very host specific, which is going to be a big cause for why they're on the decline. They need different species, need different fish, need to find them at different times of the year. So it's all very getting lucky a lot. So some of the benefits of freshwater mussels, I've talked about a little bit of these. They'll reduce, they'll filter out harmful bacteria from the water like E. coli. Then they'll reduce sedimentation. They also provide a food source for fish. So a lot of the fish that they're luring with their glochidium, a lot of them will eat the mussels themselves too. So like freshwater drum are an example of that. And then some of the material they spit back out, that's they'll only partially digest algae. They'll spit it back out onto the water column, and you'll get other fish or macroinvertebrates that will eat that. So think like suckerfish or water pennies. And so you'll get these things that are eating what mussels produce. They also aid in aquatic plant growth. So that same gunk that they spit back out, it has a lot of nitrogen in it, and that will allow plants to grow better. They serve as environmental indicators, meaning that you can use them to determine if your stream habitat is healthy. The presence of mussels indicates a healthy stream. The EPA and USDA have been working on tests to be able to do the same thing with wastewater effluent to see if it's healthy or not healthy enough to go back into the stream. They provide structural habitat, so they're providing that shell is basically macroinvertebrates are going to live on it. And then they can be used in theory for bioremediation of polluted waters, which basically just means that if you put a ton of mussels in a habitat that's not great, because they're filtering out harmful bacteria, because they're improving the ecosystem by forming more food web chains, by providing plant growth material. It can basically take up some of this pollution and allow streams to become healthy again. So the freshwater mussels are really important to the Peoria tribe specifically because they've been used historically for ornament, necklace, weapon, utensil, shell shaker dances, and for personal consumption. So they've been used just in a lot of ways by the tribe, which is why we work with them specifically, or why we got into it. And some of the causes for mussel decline are dam, loss of habitat, no access to host fish, pollution, parasites, and pathogens. So dam, loss of habitat, and no access to host fish all tie in together. The creation of hydropower dams basically changes a river system. So mussels that would normally live on shallow streams or shallow rivers are now suddenly finding themselves 20 feet underwater with no way to get to the host fish because they won't go down that low. This also goes with no access to host fish, not just in depth, but sometimes these dams will cut off a population of fish where they may have swum upstream before. Instead of swimming upstream, they can't, and they're stuck where they used to be where they used to be able to go somewhere throughout the year. Now they're stuck to one location. So mussels aren't going to be able to move up or down a stream necessarily. Pollution, some of the big ones for this area are mining pollution. But in other areas, the biggest concern might be something like pesticides or herbicides. And then another one is parasites. So parasites aren't a big deal to mussels when they're adults, but while they're still growing, they start off the size of a grain of sand, and there's lots of things that can attach to their shell and block their filtration mechanism, which basically cut off their breathing. And then pathogens, there's actually not a lot of research known about pathogens. We just know that there's quite a few of them in the area need studying. So the goals of the program here are to develop propagation techniques for freshwater mussels, develop new ones, improve the ones we have. And I will talk a little bit about the ones we have and the ones we've improved on over the last year. And then our other goals are to restore native populations due to mining contamination, and then to increase populations that have been historically important to the tribe. So populations that could maybe be used for personal consumption or for shell shaker dances, that type of thing. We also would like to reintroduce federally listed species, which is why we're working with rabbit's foot, winged maple leaf, and neosho mucket. And then one of the biggest aspects of our program is that we want to educate others on the cultural, ecological, and economical importance of freshwater mussels. A lot of people don't think about mussels as economically important, but you can save a lot of money with water filtration, with having to clean out your ponds just by having a mussel population there. It can do a lot of that, removing E. coli. It can do the getting rid of the gross dirt that sits at the top of the water. It can get rid of harmful algal blooms. So they can do a lot of stuff for free as long as you have a healthy population. And it'll save you a lot of money. They also can be used recreationally for sport fishing. There's a lot of fish, since a lot of fish eat mussels, you can use mussels as bait. And then here's some pictures. So these are largemouth bass, and we put our mussels on them artificially. We basically just put the larvae in the bucket, put the bass in the bucket with the larvae, and let them attach. And then as we're waiting for the larvae to metamorphose into juvenile mussels, they go in these AHAB units. And in these AHAB units, you'll see at the top of the unit, there is a blue line that's going through and bringing in fresh water. It's also creating a suction where the water is coming out. An upflow draft is bringing the water out of the cup and into a collection basin at the back. This collection basin on the right-hand side is basically, it's got a filter on the bottom of it that the mussels are too big to go through, but the water will flow through just fine. And so that's our system for collecting them. And then once we've collected them, they go into 4 different systems. The raceways, buckets, dog dishes, and raceway buckets, and this is based on size. So our laboratory buckets is where they all start off on. It's a very simple machine. We use Lowe's buckets, and then we have an internal bucket that sits inside of them. These yellow tubes are food lines. They're feeding the mussels algae. And then this is what the inside of the bucket looks like. That center is a sump with flow going. There's a small pump put at the bottom. Water flows over the cups. The cups are a mesh, so water will flow over and then be pushed down through them back to the bottom, and that's how it cycles. These are very small, so all the mussels that are going into the buckets are typically sand grain sized, and once they start getting bigger, we move them up. This would be an example of a mussel that's still in the bucket. These are about 1 millimeter in length. So once they get to be about 2 millimeters, they're a little bit big for the buckets and they get moved up. So this would be once we start, these would be getting ready to leave the buckets in this video. These pictures, I believe, are all Neosho bucket, which are federally listed. So the next stage in their life cycle at our lab is that they go into dog dishes. These dog dishes are ran off of filtered pond water, but the filter is very thick and it allows for us to not have to artificially feed them algae because it's ran directly off the pond water. We put sand in the buckets of the dog dishes, and then we have a blue food line, which I have a close-up that I'll move to in a second, but I like the big scope. We have a blue food line that runs water, the pond water, through creating a circular motion, basically. And the mussels will move around in the sand, and they'll just hang out there until they're at their next stage. So here's a close-up of that. That mesh screen you see in the center is just to prevent the smaller mussels from falling through if the water gets raised too high or if the current is too strong. And these are fat bucket. These are not federally listed in this picture. Once they're done with the dog dish stage, we move them to raceway buckets. So these are still getting filtered water, but the filter has increased. So we've got a filter at the bottom of these plastic buckets, a mesh filter, bigger than what the dog dishes have, but smaller than just regular pond water flowing through. And they'll stay in there until they're about half the size of a thumb, and then they can actually go out to the pond. Or they can go in the raceways, which here's a picture of the raceways at large. So these will store all of our adult mussels, our pregnant females, and they just can live in there this machine is very self-sustaining. It doesn't require a lot of minimal cleaning, minimal work. We don't have to feed it or anything because it's just directly from the pond. And we have a new system that we're working on installing right now. It's at our facility but not hooked up, and it's called a FLEPSI, a floating upweller system. And it basically is a dock that will store adult-sized mussels, and it will store pseudo-adults. So once they're too big for the dog dishes, they could be ready to go in this type of machine. And in this one, so this is the one that's at our facility right now that we're setting up still. This is the dock. It's about 20 feet long. It's pretty big. In the center of the dock is this law on the left-hand side. This goes in the center of the dock. It's got a giant hole in the side of it. That's where a pump would go. Water flows through it into the open holes on the side of the equipment. And so those open holes are where baskets hook into. So all the baskets that are on the upper right and the lower right, those go and attach to the holes via PVC pipe, and then they run flowing water through continuously throughout the year. So this is very efficient. There's not a lot of maintenance involved besides spraying out the screens. And it allows for us to do bigger projects. So some of the cons for mussel propagation is that depending on what you're doing, so the ones not associated with the FLUPSI, they tend to be really time intensive and labor intensive. When they're in the bucket, you have to physically remove parasites typically once a week, and this means putting them under a microscope and pipetting out all the parasites you see. And then bleaching the buckets, making sure all the bleach is out of the buckets before you put the mussels back in. So each bucket could take up to 8 hours a week to clean if they're very young, and there's a lot of them. Then all of these systems, besides the raceways, require some amount of pre-filtering. So the buckets get filtered to a very small degree where no more food is left in the water. We use pond water for filtering, but by the filtering we use, basically no food. You're only going to get, salt. So we have to add in all the food with our buckets. Thankfully, we don't have to add in food with the other two. They have lower flow rates than what the FLUPSI would have, meaning they're not getting as much water flow, as much food. So the minute mussels can go into the FLUPSI, the better, because they'll grow faster. Food costs can be kind of expensive, and then there's limited stocking capacity. There's just not a lot of space for a lot of mussels in the dog dishes, buckets, raceway buckets. So spacing becomes an issue. And so that's just kind of a little bit about our production stuff. The more interesting things is our education and outreach. So we had the Miami Heritage Festival last week, and we got to talk to a lot of people and had a little station where kids could see mussel shells and how they were made into buttons and used to make basically the buttons on formal attire. And I believe they were allowed to make necklaces out of them as well. And so I was able to bring, these are two of the business cards that we brought to the festival. And basically it just has some neat facts about mussel shells. So the reason mussel shells are in decline today is all the stuff I've already mentioned, but the interesting tidbit about mussel history is that before basically the dams doomed them, is that they were used to make buttons for dress shirts. And this probably caused the biggest historical problem, and we still deal with the consequences because they were harvested so frequently and so thoroughly that the populations just never recovered from button harvesting. So this QR code works. If you guys get really interested, it just attaches to the FMCS website, the Freshwater Mollusk Conservation Society. And it can tell you a little bit more about freshwater mussel shells in the button industry. And then this is another thing we got to bring with us. We did a little newspaper article snippet to explain why we do what we do, our history and our mission. It's not very much different from what I've told you. I cover the life cycle from Glochidia to adults. There's a QR code that links to our Facebook page. And then I talk a little bit about our history just of the consumption of mussels and of the use of their shells. And then I mentioned some of the species we work with in detail. And if any of you guys are interested in the PowerPoint or in the newsletter, I can actually send it to you. And that's kind of all I have. So if you guys have any questions.
Thank you, Regina. I did just send you a question from one of the attendees. It's in your chat box.
Okay. Let me figure out how to get to my chat box really fast.
It should be down in the right-hand corner of your screen.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, there's a few questions. Our facility has an entire pond that we can use for propagation. The answer is pretty big. We have a pond that we can use for propagation. We have a laboratory space that's for the mussel bucket and the fish, and that's Sorry, I'm trying to guess how large that is. I don't want to say anything that's over exaggerating. I would say they're both at least 20. That's going to be small. They may be two 40 by 40 foot spaces, but I'm not positive on that number. The space is pretty large though, and you guys are welcome to come tour if any of you are ever interested in that as well. Our staff number is currently me, but we usually have me, one other person, and an intern. So currently staffing is very limited, but ideally there's about 3 people running a muscle laboratory. The dog dishes is where I'm at right now. Sorry, guys. So there actually is something like an aquaponics system that we're getting ready to install this month. It's called a pulse overflow system. And the way a pulse overflow system works is that, like in aquaponics, you'll have shelving typically. The shelving will be filled with containers of water, sand at the bottom, and then mussels in the containers with the sand. Each container will have a drip over it that's connected to a larger water reservoir, and that will be connected to a timer. And so the pulses come however you program it to be, but usually it ends up being like, some people do it twice a day, some people do it once an hour, just depending on how much water you want to pulse in. And so as the new water is being pulsed in, the water in the containers overflows and is being pushed out. And so that's kind of how mussel hydroponics work. If you want to email me, I can actually send you pictures of the pulse overflow system if that's interesting to you, and I can send you ours when it's finished because we are in the middle of installing that. But it all has to be made from scratch. There's no one sells them, which is a shame. So on the question with, if you have a stream with E. coli, what could be habitat conductive to mussel reintroduction? It's entirely dependent on what species of mussel you want to use. So if you know that you have a heavily polluted water, you probably don't want to be putting in sensitive species. Pond mussels, fragile paper shell, paper pond shell, those would all work really well. Those all can exist in silt-like substrate. They can all exist in regular pond habitat. If you're talking about, if you have a stream rather than a pond, you actually can use those same things too. I would say pond mussel, paper pond shell, those would also grow well in that type of setting. And then fat mucket usually does okay. But yeah, that'll be dependent on what exactly the habitat looks like and if you want a sensitive species or not. And if you have a specific example of that and need advice, you're also welcome to email me. So mussels take from the soil. Okay, that's a good question. Mussels will take, algae will basically, how do I word this? Algae doesn't just exist on the top of the water. Usually it exists all along the water column. When it gets filtered out, when it gets to be heavier bits, mussels will still take that algae from the soil. They'll also take up bacteria from the soil as well, and they'll take decaying matter. So they'll eat quite a bit of things from the soil. So it's not so much that they're not getting nutrition from the soil itself. They don't have the ability. Soil particles are so small that they get filtered in with the algae and the bacteria. So they're not getting any nutrition from the soil, but they have to eat it. Basically, they don't have a choice. And it doesn't hurt them. They basically, I like to call it gumming something. They basically put it in their mouths, roll it around, and spit it back out at the bottom of the pond. I think that answers all the questions. If you guys have more or you want to email me, I'll quick put my email in the chat box. And feel free to get a hold of me with anything more specific. I know that we're limited on time and it's really hard to get into specifics. So let me quick put my email in.
Thank you, Regina. Yeah, and if anybody has questions after the fact, they can email me and I can forward them on to Regina or Ron or Roger.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you. So while we're waiting to see if anyone has, if they're trying to put in another question in the chat box really quickly, I just wanted to announce the last session of the ITEC conference starts today at 3 and it's species of interest. So you guys be sure and join us for that. So I don't see any other questions. Ron, do you see any questions in your chat box?
No, I don't have any questions on my end.
Okay, thank you. Regina, did you receive any other questions one last time?
So I haven't seen any yet.
Okay. Well, if for some reason we missed your question or something, please just feel free to email Ron or Regina or me. And with that, we will end this session. Thank you so much to the presenters and the attendees for joining us. And we'll see you guys back here at 3 o'clock. Thank you so much.
Thank you.